We're getting a new inside look at what life was like for the generals who took their orders from President Trump. In our first look of a new book written by Susan Glasser and Peter Baker, the authors describe the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, talking to the president before taking the job. And it reads, Milley assured him, Mr. President, you're going to be making the decisions. All I can guarantee from me is I'm going to give you an honest answer. And I'm not going to talk about it on the front page of the Washington Post. I'll give you an honest answer on everything I can, and you are going to make the decisions, and as long as they're legal, I'll support it. As long as they're legal, it was not clear how much that caveat even registered with Trump. Joining us now is Susan Glasser, CNN Global Affairs analyst and staff writer at The New Yorker. She's the co-author of this book called The Divider, which is billed as the inside story of the 4 years when Donald Trump went to war with Washington. And Susan, I really want to get to you speaking about your book, but I want to talk about what may be the most interesting part of it, which is the resignation letter that Mark Milley wrote but didn't send. So I'm just going to read a little bit about that so that you can speak about it. This was drafted in June of 2020 after what happened in Washington outside the White House with the use of the military. And he said, "It is my belief that you are doing great and irreparable harm to my country. I believe that you have made a concerted effort over time to politicize the United States military. I thought that I could change that. I've come to the realization that I can't." He goes on to say, "You are using the military to create fear in the minds of the people. The American people trust their military, and they trust us to protect them against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and our military will do just that." And he says, third, "I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States that says all men and women are created equal. He says, it's obvious to me that you don't hold those values dear and the cause that I serve. And lastly," he said, "it is my deeply held belief that you're ruining the international order, which was instituted in 1949. He says, "You don't understand what the war was about. In fact, you subscribe to many of the principles that we fought against." But Susan, he never sent it.
Well, that's right. It's really powerful to hear. We may have had a sense of a conflict between Trump and many of the generals who worked with him, but to hear in their own words their fear that the president of the United States was in effect a rogue president, that he was not even a subscriber to many of the ideals of the Constitution. After Lafayette Square, that was a mistake. That was a big disaster in many ways for Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the then Defense Secretary Mark Esper marching through Lafayette Square. It gave the appearance of the military participating in politics. He apologized for it, but he was agonized, according to our reporting, about whether or not to resign. He consulted with many who said, listen, we don't have a tradition of resignation in protest for our uniformed military, and that it would actually be more important to remain in office. Remember, this is 6 months before January 6th. And so to read those words now, when we know about the cataclysmic ending of the Trump presidency. But this was a through line we found in our reporting going all the way back to the beginning of the Trump presidency. The conflicts with the generals, current and former, began almost from day one of the Trump presidency because Trump was determined to challenge their conventions. At one point, a senior general even told him that's what dictators do, to something Trump wanted to do.
I mean, that's a hell of a resignation letter. Again, Mark Milley didn't send it, but he lists out the things there. That was remarkable to me that he even thought about sending that. And I guess we can debate for generations about whether or not it would have had a bigger impact had he quit at the time. Susan, some other news from you in this book with Peter Baker, your husband, where Trump is quoted as telling his generals, and I'll read this, "You effing generals, why can't you be like the German generals?" Which generals, John Kelly asked. And then Trump said the German generals in World War II. That in and of itself, interesting and maybe disturbing to some people. But then it went on from there, a little bit of a history lesson, Susan.
John, it's breathtaking, honestly. This is a confrontation, a conversation between the then White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and Donald Trump. And you almost can't believe it, but the president of the United States was unhappy because he felt that his generals, as he called them, the American generals, were not as loyal as he perceived the Nazi generals under Hitler to be. He thought that was the better model for a general. Now, John Kelly, as you said, schooled Trump and tried to say, well, wait a minute, Mr. President, they weren't completely subservient. And actually, they tried to kill Hitler 3 times. And Trump, interrupted him in this discussion and said, no, 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 that's not right. They were completely loyal. It's shocking.
It is shocking. And the politicization of the military, which Milley talks about in his resignation letter that he never sent, right? The fact that the military is supposed to be apolitical is a hallmark of American society. And it's so interesting you're describing in such detail, Susan, how the military itself was fighting to preserve that as a civilian commander was fighting to bastardize that.
I think you put your finger on it. This is like there's no handbook, there's no guide in the Constitution for what to do when the president himself is a national security threat. And they believe, that civil military relations is almost a religion for the most senior generals, as you know, in our military. And I think this conflict, again, the through line, this did not start after the November 2020 election, right? There were these conflicts about the role in the military. Trump wanted to cloak himself in the power and the photo ops and the, what he perceived to be the strength of the military from day one of his presidency. And, what I was struck by was the recurring theme of this. There's a fight with the generals in the first summer of his presidency over a military parade. That was what I was mentioning about the vice chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Oval Office telling him, no, Mr. President, we can't do the kind of parade you want. That's what dictators do, right there in the Oval Office. And so it was a conflict from day one.
What other juicy tidbits are going to be out in this book, Susan? We're just getting a taste of it now in the New Yorker, but what else do you got in there?
Well, it's coming soon, but this is significant. We felt that it was important to do a book on the 4 years of the Trump presidency and to really try to understand that this threat to democracy after the 2020 election did not come out of nowhere. And in some ways, going back to the early years of the Trump administration, there were some extraordinary things that never became public that helped to understand the mess that it all ended up in.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's this whole academic realm of, civilian military relations. It can get kind of lofty, but we saw it all play out in very real terms under the Trump administration. And here you are writing this fantastic book, taking us through all of it. Susan, thank you so much. And the book, of course, is The Divider. And you can pick that up soon.
This fall.